Some of Ken Paxton's usual big backers have not pitched in yet for his Senate race. What that tells us about the runoff election today on the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm Laura Rice. Houston ISD is trying something new next school year. It's launching so-called AI-focused schools. So what's that mean exactly? The business of craft brewing was growing for years, but now they're shutting down faster than they're opening. A look at the shift. We'll also look at how Texas is working towards getting mental health patients out of the criminal justice cycle. And though gas prices are high, it's still often cheaper than flying. We'll take a look at some Texas road trip recommendations. That's today on the Texas Standard. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time for Wednesday, May 6th. I'm Laura Rice. We're less than 2 weeks away from the start of early voting in the Texas runoff elections, and we can't exactly know what's going to happen yet. So the polls are trying to predict it. The latest out of the University of Houston's Hobby School shows Attorney General Ken Paxton slightly leads incumbent U.S. Senator John Cornyn in the runoff for his seat. But it's very close, 48% to 45%. This new poll just focused on the GOP runoff, but a couple of recent ones asked about when Democrats are back in the mix in November. They both found State Representative James Tallarico would beat both Cornyn and Paxton. Despite that, a brand new NPR-PBS Marist poll shows Republicans are slightly edging out Democrats nationwide when it comes to enthusiasm for November's election. So if all of that has left you scratching your head about what really may happen come the general, we do have another indicator we can look toward. Money. And specifically, it looks like Republican Ken Paxton is struggling to raise the money he feels he needs to win. Lauren McGahee is the Texas politics correspondent for the New York Times, and she's been writing about this Senate race. Lauren, welcome back to the Texas Standard.
Of course, happy to be here.
So are these fundraising troubles related to Paxton's political baggage, indictments, lawsuits from former staff, and a contentious divorce, for example, or is something else going on here?
You know, I think the story is a bit more complicated because voters in Texas, at least, have known about those issues, many of them for a long time, and have still continued to give and vote for Mr. Paxton, right? So we spoke to a number of political consultants who said that this is a complicated race for big Republican donors. You know, there's an incumbent, John Cornyn, who's being challenged by a popular MAGA favorite in Ken Paxton. And it's difficult for them to choose a winner in a race that is this close because they may not want to be on the outs with the person who ends up winning if they choose the wrong guy, right?
So who are some of the big donors Paxton's relied on in the past who are on the sidelines so far?
Yeah, so we did an analysis of Paxton's state campaign fundraising. So this is looking back into fall 2021, right before he ran for re-election the last time as Attorney General. And we looked at his top 25 donors and then reached out to those folks to see why most of them were deciding not to give in this race or not to give as much as they had. These are people like Jerry Jones of the Dallas Cowboys, the founder of Buc-ee's, our beloved gas station chain, and a number of billionaire businessmen in Texas from all kinds of sectors, from telecom to oil and gas. And we spoke to one who told us that his decision not to give more in the primary wasn't an endorsement against or for Ken Paxton. It was a decision to keep that money safe in a lockbox until the general election. He said what was important to him was beating James Tallarico, the Democrat, and not as much who won the primary.
Well, what impact do we think these money troubles may be having on the Paxton campaign? Polls still show the race is very close, but Cornyn has outspent him by a lot.
This race is going to be a referendum on the power of money and how important it is. Paxton has great name recognition with a conservative base that turns out in primary elections and turns out again if there's a runoff. And so we're going to have to see whether these money troubles actually end up costing him this runoff election. A number of consultants said he still looks pretty good despite the fundraising gap between him and Senator Cornyn.
Well, I mentioned Cornyn has outspent Paxton, but how are Cornyn and Democrat James Tallarico doing in the money department?
They're both doing very well. John Cornyn has been a senator for a long time. He has a very strong fundraising base and has been able to bring in millions of dollars. I think our total count for all of his campaigns and a PAC supporting his candidacy was over 50 million. James Tallarico has outraised both Cornyn and Paxton at least this year. So he's doing very well in the fundraising department. And that's, a big deal for a Democrat in a state where Democrats haven't won for more than 30 years. So Tallarico is hoping that money push and the fact that he does not have anyone he's running against right now in a Democratic runoff will give him some time and some cash to get his message out before November.
I want to dig into that Cornyn fundraising a bit, though. I mean, you mentioned that some, as far as donating to Paxton, are waiting until the general. Is Cornyn
That's
not
right.
having that same issue?
He still has a good fundraising base with national fundraising sources. And, he does have some loyal fundraisers who have given big dollars to a political action fund that is supporting him. This might be a little bit of the incumbent benefit here with folks saying, well, I'm going to give to John Cornyn because I've always given to him. And that might be pushing him ahead a bit. But he does have connection to these national fundraising sources that Paxton, as the challenger, may not be able to tap into at this time unless he wins. And, then consultants told us, Paxton may be struggling to fundraise now, but if he pulls out a win in the runoff, they expect big Republican money to start flowing into his campaign ahead of November.
Well, I mentioned in the intro a couple of polls recently had Tallarico beating either Cornyn or Paxton in November. Are Republicans taking that threat seriously, and is that having any impact on fundraising?
I think they are. Some folks we talked to said that the general consensus, at least as of right now, is that Cornyn might be a stronger challenger to Tallarico. He might do better against Tallarico. And some of the polls do show that Tallarico has a narrower lead or there is more flush with Cornyn than Paxton. And that might be hurting Paxton's ability to fundraise. And it might hurt his ability to fundraise if he wins in the runoff. But, we won't know anything until November. So this is a very interesting campaign. It's one of the most interesting campaign seasons since I moved to Texas, a dozen years ago. And the uncertainty, can make for excitement in some circles and anxiety in others.
Lauren McGahee covers Texas politics for the New York Times. Lauren, always good to talk.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Another craft brewery in Houston closed its doors last month. True Anomaly had been in business for 7 years. The closure is far from the only one. 6 other Houston area breweries have also shut down recently, and it's happening all across the country. In fact, Houston Public Media's Anna Monroe reports that after decades of steady growth, more breweries closed than opened last year.
Despite the sweltering 90-degree Houston heat, fans from all over have returned to celebrate a beloved East Downtown brewery. It is a closing day of True Anomaly, and it is packed to the brim. Nothing but smiles and retelling memories can be heard. For many, coming together is bittersweet. Pat Linney, a former worker here, came back to Houston to say one last goodbye.
I'm glad it was here. I think a lot of people were glad it was here, and the beer community lost a good one, I think.
Just a couple years ago, the craft brewery industry was thriving. In 2023, more than 10,000 breweries were serving customers all across the country. But last year, more than 400 closed, the largest loss in a single year for the industry. Experts and brewery owners point to several factors for the slip and sips, including changes in drinking habits, rising operating costs, and the growing popularity of alternatives like THC drinks. Blake Mudd is an assistant professor in global retailing and customer science at the University of Houston. He says the shift in the market is less of a bubble burst and more of a market correction.
We saw this huge expansion, and I think it was overexpanding. It got a little too big for its britches. The American consumer loves something really quickly, and then is really quick to abandon something really quickly, depending on what the trend is at the time.
Mudd says the industry is incredibly competitive and expensive. tapping into younger customers may also be difficult.
I think some people will immediately say that there's, a more mindful consumer, especially our younger consumers maybe are a bit more health conscious.
A survey conducted last summer by Gallup revealed alcohol consumption hit a record low, and young adults had a worse perception of alcohol. Nearly 66% felt like drinking in moderation was bad for their health. 23-year-old Mackenzie Sills graduated from U of H last year. She says she quit drinking for the sake of her mental and physical health.
And yeah, I think a lot of our generation too, they're just more focused on working out and being outside. We're more of a health conscious generation, I think.
Robert Eichenlaub, owner of Eureka Heights Brewery in Houston, says the dip in customers and rise in costs have been a wake-up call.
Raw material costs are going up again, right? Because, now we're suspected tariffs, right? So we're having to navigate through that world.
A slump in sales at the beginning of 2024, which Eichenlaub optimistically tied to dry January, never rebounded.
We started looking at what alternative beverages can we make, right? And so we started looking at kind of what was happening in the market with other brands.
That's when he noticed a surge in demand for THC drinks, a non-alcoholic cannabis-infused option. According to Gallup, marijuana use has doubled in young adults. Eichenlaub is hoping to tap into that customer base. Eureka Heights recently released a new THC cocktail. Eichenlaub says it's cheaper, faster to make, and hopes it works better with the wellness crowd.
It is effectively flavored water, right? So no alcohol whatsoever in it. So it's kind of our version of it in a product.
It may be a lucrative path. Analysts project that THC sales to hit $5 billion by 2028. But the THC industry faces growing uncertainty in Texas as legal challenges and expiring federal protections threaten hemp-driven productions. Back at the True Anomaly closing, Pat Linney, the former employee, is expecting the night to be emotional for him. From celebrating his engagement at the brewery to his child's first birthday, many memories were made here.
Cheers to True Anomaly. Thanks for all the memories, all the, starting me in my career. And I guess, I hope this isn't the end. And thanks for 7 years.
I'm Anna Monroe in Houston.
There's more Texas Standard just ahead. We're checking in on efforts to address the cycle of jails and hospitals that some people in a mental health crisis find themselves in. Some solutions coming up next.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Casa. For a child in foster care, small moments today can have a big impact tomorrow. More on how lending time and support can help make a difference at becomeacasa.org. Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Monthly Presents The Story, a docuseries about the state of Texas. Stories about our culture and what's at stake from the perspective of the magazine's writers, airing weekends on local PBS stations and streaming on the PBS website and app.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. Texas prides itself in its size, but being big and spread out can come with challenges. We put that in the spotlight this time last week in looking at how Abilene responds to mental health emergencies. Often, once law enforcement arrives, people are cycled through jails and hospitals, but rarely get the treatment they need. Now we're digging further into solutions. KACU's Josiah Wanell looks at the Texas infrastructure, the courts, the laws, and the people trying to close the gaps. He begins with a story.
There is a story told about a man who got a flat tire outside a state psychiatric hospital. As he knelt in the grass searching for the lug nuts he'd scattered, a patient appeared at the fence, watching. After a moment, the patient called out, "Take one lug nut off each of the other tires. You'll have 3 on each wheel. You can make it home before it rains." The driver looked up, stunned. He said, "How does a smart guy like you wind up in a place like this?" The patient smiled.
"They may think I'm crazy, but I'm not stupid."
Judge Oscar Kazin has been telling that story for years, from the bench in Bexar County, San Antonio, where he built something Texas has never seen before. He tells it because it does in 10 seconds what policy papers cannot. It forces you to reconsider what you think you know about who ends up in the system and why. Judge Brent Carr spent 32 years on the bench in Tarrant County, including more than 2 decades running specialty courts for people with mental illness, veterans, and survivors of trafficking. The numbers he carries with him are not abstract.
In the confinement population, particularly in the jails, it runs as high as 65%. So it's more than 300% more than what you would find in the general population.
300%. And the gap sharpens when you look at serious mental illness specifically.
About 4% of the general population has serious mental illness, and almost 20% of people in confinement have serious mental illness.
1 in 5 behind bars. The fix did not come from one place, or one person, or one bill. It came in layers, and it started with communication. For decades, the courts, the clinics, law enforcement, and the hospitals had been operating on separate tracks, speaking different languages, rarely in the same room. Professor Brian Shannon is a legal scholar at Texas Tech who has spent more than 3 decades shaping mental health law in Texas.
Texas, to my knowledge, was the first state in the country where our 2 high courts, we're unusual that way to have 2 high courts, but the Supreme Court over civil cases and the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals over criminal cases met together, had hearings about some of these issues, and established the Texas Judicial Mental Health Commission.
Established in 2018, the commission was built to be a bridge, training judges, drafting legislation, publishing bench books, and hosting statewide summits. Its mission was straightforward: get the right people in the same room and then keep them there. But Shannon is quick to point out what a commission alone cannot do.
We can't solve all of the challenges and issues just with new laws. And for a lawyer to say that, I have to admit, we can't solve it all with changes in the law and new laws. It has to come hand in hand with sufficient and appropriate services.
Laws without resources are just paper. And Judge Carr learned that lesson early, not from a textbook, but from the cases that didn't go the way he hoped.
The research is pretty standard that you do have better outcomes as long as during the participation period you also do exit planning. I mean, you can't surround people with resources, pull the rug out from under them, and expect them to thrive indefinitely.
What Texas needed wasn't just a new policy. It needed a new architecture, one that kept people connected to care long after the courtroom door closed. And one judge in a probate court in San Antonio had already started building it. Judge Oscar Kazin did not set out to become a pioneer. He lost a re-election bid by 6 votes, and was preparing to leave the bench entirely when a fellow judge offered him a role overseeing civil mental health commitments in Bexar County. He took it, and what he found there changed the direction of his career. People were being hospitalized, stabilized, discharged, and then left entirely on their own. No team, no follow-up, no structure. Weeks later, sometimes days later, they were back.
If we can take a certain class of people that are consistently going in and out of hospitals, who are taken, stabilized, and then left alone, and then a month later they're right back, or 6 months later they're right back, or worse yet, they left from the hospital and weren't paid attention to again, and we find them dead.
Kazin looked at the drug court model, which had shown the consistent judicial involvement paired with wraparound services could break cycles that jail alone never could. And he asked, why can't we do the same thing for mental illness?
I took that statute to say, I'm not just going to discharge you. I'm going to wrap a team around you. The court is going to be responsible to you. The staff is going to be responsible to you. You're going to be responsible to your mental health and the court. And together we're going to figure out a way to have you succeed.
What he built became known as Assistant Outpatient Treatment, or AOT. It is, at its core, a court-ordered treatment program for people with serious mental illness who have a documented history of cycling through crisis. A judge oversees a structured treatment plan. A team consisting of a psychiatrist, social worker, case manager, defense attorney, and prosecutor meet regularly. The goal is not punishment, it is continuity. Professor Shannon, who has helped draft the legislation that brought AOT formally into the Texas Criminal Code, describes how the docket worked in its earliest days.
as he started up, he talked about how he would have all of the participants in the matter. So representatives from the treatment team, the person subject to the order, appointed counsel for the individual, county attorney, all come in for a docket call, let's say every 2 weeks. And at that docket call, you say, I sometimes it was more than this, but I asked 3 basic questions. How you doing today? Did you have a good week? Have you been taking your meds? Did you go to your appointments?
3 questions. And the results for that initial population were immediate.
And just having that team together and the black robe effect of the judge being there, for this population that they started out with, they greatly reduced state hospitalization for that population, kept people in the community longer. And some early studies showed that recommitments are down, staying with medication is up.
The black robe effect, the way that the perceived authority of a judge, used not to threaten, but to engage, cuts through the noise in a way that clinical appointments alone cannot. What that sounds like in practice has almost never been heard outside a courtroom until now.
This story was reported by Josiah Wanell and is part of an ongoing series from our partners at KACU in Abilene. They're calling it Minds on Trial. Tomorrow, we'll take you somewhere the public rarely gets access to, inside an assisted outpatient treatment briefing. That's Thursday on the Texas Standard.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Realtors, providing representation at every stage of the home ownership journey, helping clients understand their options and manage complex transaction details. Info at texasrealestate.com. Support for Texas Standard comes from HEB and the My HEB app, which is available for download, and shopping fresh departments like seafood, produce, bakery, and deli, and scheduling curbside pickup or home delivery. More at heb.com.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Matt Harab. Texas is investing millions of dollars in new flood warning technology nearly a year after deadly flooding in the Hill Country. As the Texas Newsroom's Lucio Vasquez reports, the new system aims to give Hill Country communities earlier alerts before waters turn dangerous.
Researchers say the $4 million system will predict where flooding will happen and how severe it could be, giving residents several hours of additional warning time. This comes about 10 months after catastrophic flooding in the Hill Country killed more than 130 people. Philip Bedient is with Rice University. He's working on the system with researchers at the University of Texas in Arlington.
This system, we hope, will provide anywhere from 1 to maybe as much as 3 hours lead time. And it's that lead time that's critical for people to make important decisions about evacuating and or leaving the area or moving to higher ground.
An early version of the system could be ready by the end of this summer, with a full rollout expected next year. I'm Lucio Vasquez in Houston.
Many summer camps are struggling to meet the safety requirements passed in the wake of last summer's deadly flood, specifically a requirement that camps have redundant internet access through fiber optics. 19 camps filed suit last month, saying the cost is too high and could keep them from reopening. Both Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and State House Speaker Dustin Burrows say they might move to waive that requirement. The Dallas County Sheriff's Office and State Prison Agency have launched a streamlined inmate transfer program. Our Marina Trahan Martinez reports that the penitentiary packet system should reduce jail overcrowding, which has cost taxpayers millions of dollars.
The county and Texas Department of Criminal Justice launched the partnership May 1st. County inmates being released or transferred after their eligibility has been a long-standing issue. Paula Keith with the Dallas Peace and Justice Center said during Commissioner's Court Tuesday that the 45-day transfer requirement should be met.
The sheriff generates a PIN to go to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. If there is a judge signature or something that is not there, they kick it back the time starts over again.
The program aims to avoid delays with the state picking up prison-sentenced inmates. I'm Marina Trahan Martinez in Dallas.
And a former FedEx driver who pled guilty to killing a 7-year-old girl has been sentenced to death. Tanner Horner was delivering packages in the town of Paradise, northwest of Fort Worth, when he abducted Athena Strand in 2022. Jurors listened to 20 days of testimony before handing down the punishment. I'm Matt Harrop in the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Texas Monthly Presents The Story, a docuseries about the state of Texas, our culture, and what's at stake from the perspective of the magazine's writers. Weekends on local PBS stations and streaming on the PBS website and app.
33 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time. I'm David Brown. Well, it wasn't the Globe Theater per se. Nonetheless, a Texas-based Shakespeare troupe is making adjustments as their longtime home. A replica of the Globe has been torn down, leaving the actors in a new but unfamiliar space. For KUT News in Austin, reporter Ella Kopakin has been tracking the second act for The Barron's Men.
The actors commanding the stage at the Scottish Rite Theatre last Thursday looked less like the average community theatre troupe and more like time travelers.
Pray you, lock hand in hand, yourselves in order set, and 20 glowworms shall our lanterns be, to guide our measures round about the tree. But stay, I smell a man of Middle Earth.
The play is Shakespeare's Merry Wives of Windsor, and the players are the Barron's Men, Austin's only Elizabethan Shakespeare company. That means that the troupe performs Shakespeare according to the standards of the late 16th century. There are handmade costumes and props and simple sets that fit right into the style of the time. They do, however, make a couple exceptions. Women and electricity are allowed. Jackie O'Keefe has been a supporter of the troupe for 3 years.
They are very refreshingly open and they feel original.
This run at the Scottish Rite marks 27 years for the Barron's Men. It's also the group's first time performing in a venue that isn't their longtime home, the Curtin Theatre. Last fall, the theatre was closed and dismantled after a real estate developer bought the property it sits on. Here's Michael Osborne, the director of Merry Wives of Windsor. He joined the troupe in 2011 and currently serves as president of its board of directors.
The Barron's Men have become synonymous with the Curtin Theatre, so it's kind of an unknown for everybody.
Executive Artistic Director Lindsay Polinsky has been with the Barron's Men since 2010.
The Curtin Theatre was one of North America's only wooden O Elizabethan replica outdoor theaters. It was purpose-built for the Barron's Men 20 years ago.
The original wooden O was the Globe Theatre, a rounded amphitheatre in London where Shakespeare staged his plays. Over time, the Barron's Men evolved from a few friends performing for each other into a full-fledged theatre company. They put on 2 shows a year and became a certified 501c3 nonprofit in 2015. Here's Michael Osborne again.
Every bit of money that comes in goes right back into the organization, into development. We do actor workshops, and we do also a lot of educational outreach. So we will go out to schools and we'll run some scenes. We'll do like a little history lesson.
The theater itself grew too. Other organizations began using the stage, but the Barron's Men remained the main residence. Then, last year, the troupe got news that the land the theater was built on would be sold.
They're like, you can do one more show there and then you got to get out. And that was much ado, and it was like one of our biggest shows. It was a wonderful send-off.
Lindsay Polinsky directed the final show staged at the theater, the Will They Won't They couple comedy Much Ado About Nothing. The board and artistic directors began planning for the next chapter of the Barron's Men. The goal became building their dream theater.
Our big, mood board of grand ideas. We want an outdoor theater and we want an indoor theater and a rehearsal space and locker rooms and real bathrooms for the audience. After hearing those slamming porta potty doors for 20 years.
In the meantime, the team's main focus is keeping their annual 2-show schedule going.
At the end of Much Ado, we sort of launched a relocation fund. That's a easy peasy donate button on our website. And we'll be putting more concerted efforts towards community partnerships. And we need to really look at sustainable fundraising for figuring out how we can ramp up into our growth.
One of their biggest discoveries has been realizing how much fans of the troupe want to help. Hudson Perma is 15. He started coming to the Curtin 3 years ago with his family.
I had been aware of Shakespeare, but I never experienced it.
in a proper setting and in a proper way. I think that's why I enjoyed it so much. It just felt very real.
Hudson and his dad run a local film club, the Austin Flick Click. It's dedicated to exposing younger audiences to classic films. After hearing about the curtain's closure, he reached out to see if there might be a way to use the club to raise money and awareness for the troupe.
It's not just a loss of art, it's a loss of community. And we were like, well, we can help them.
The Barron's men decided to collaborate with Hudson for a 3-film series called To Screen or Not to Screen. All proceeds go to the players.
There's so many good Shakespeare film adaptations, so it kind of just all fit and locked into place.
With Merry Wives, another play coming up this fall, and the Flick Click series, the troupe has officially entered its second act.
We're a 100% volunteer-run organization. We're committed and invested in the next 25 years of the Barron's Men and beyond. We hope to build an organization that outlives us.
While the curtain may be gone, the Barron's Men are here to stay. For KUT's Art Beat, I'm Ella Kopeikin in Austin.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider that's been caring for hardworking Texans for over 30 years. More at texasmutual.com/expert partner. Support for Texas Standard comes from the beef-loving Texans at the Texas Beef Council, a community passionate about what they eat, where it comes from, and how it's prepared. Recipes and meal ideas at beeflovingtexans.com.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. Though past iterations of the Spurs were NBA champs, the current version is a relatively young team with little experience when it comes to playoff crunch time. Texas Public Radio's Brian Kirkpatrick has more on the San Antonio team's playoff run heading into Game 2 in the conference semifinals tonight against the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Chris Mannix, a senior writer who covers the NBA for Sports Illustrated, says there's a clear formula for reaching and winning the NBA Finals, pointing to recent champions as examples. He says Denver and Boston took time to reach the finals and win. He says the current NBA champions may be the best example of that formula.
Oklahoma City, I think, is a pretty good parallel or a pretty good comp to San Antonio. 2 years ago, they were the number 1 seed. They made it to the second round, and they got beat in the second round because, in large part, due to they didn't have experienced stars on their roster. A year later, they win the championship. So it's very difficult to leapfrog steps in the NBA.
However, Mannix says center Victor Wembanyama may have the talent to help overcome the Spurs' lack of playoff experience. He says the entire Spurs roster has played in around 160 playoff games, with power forward Harrison Barnes accounting for 71 of those games.
The Spurs, because of the uniqueness of Wembanyama, have a chance to do it, but if they don't do it, it's probably because they just weren't ready for this type of stage.
Mannix says Spurs fans are in for a long playoff run, if not now, soon, with Wemby as a cornerstone for the next 10 years, alongside players like Stephon Castle, De'Aaron Fox, and Dylan Harper. He predicts the Spurs will win a championship soon, if not this year.
If this team bows out, it will unquestionably be disappointing for everyone, including and most notably probably Victor Wembanyama. But I would put my money on San Antonio winning a championship in the next 3 years.
As for Game 2 against the Minnesota Timberwolves, Mannix expects Wemby and the team to shake off some of the nerves and inexperience that showed up in Game 1 when Timberwolves star Anthony Edwards returned from injury. The Timberwolves won 104-102 to take a 1-0 lead in the series. Mannix thinks the Spurs will make the necessary adjustments to get past the Timberwolves and win Round 2, but it won't be easy. I'm Brian Kirkpatrick in San Antonio.
Game 2 tips off at the Frost Bank Center in San Antonio tonight at 8:30 Central Time. Over the next month or so, the school year is going to be winding down for students around the state, and how to spend time off during the summer is a question parents and kids struggle with every year. Well, luckily, the folks over at Texas Highways have already put some thought into this, and in their latest issue, a team of writers mapped out some of the best, most scenic road trips in the Lone Star State. Bet you haven't taken all of them. Dina Gashman is an author and contributor to Texas Highway. She was on the team that put the list together. Dina, welcome back to the Texas Standard.
Thanks for having me back.
Let's talk about your primary contribution to this list. You have a road trip here that begins in Fort Worth. Tell us, you grew up in Fort Worth, did you not?
I did from birth until third grade when we moved to Houston. But yeah, Fort Worth, I always consider my hometown.
So what is your core recommendation if you happen to find yourself up and around the Fort Worth area?
So mine it's a little bit of a nostalgia trip for me because when we first started talking about this idea of weekend drives, I started thinking about Sunday drives, which people don't tend to do anymore for, some good reasons, some not good. And so my drive was from Fort Worth, from my grandparents' old house on Maudlin Avenue, which has been reconstructed. And from Maudlin Avenue at my grandparents' house, out down Camp Bowie and towards Mineral Well. So when I used to do these Sunday drives in my grandfather's Chevy Stepside, we would sometimes go to a family friend's farm or just kind of drive. But I went to Mineral Wells from Fort Worth, and it was great. I mean, it was, I couldn't remember where the exact farm was, but I went to the town and kind of hung out there for a while, and I loved it.
Mineral Wells, I tend to think of that as the home of a product known as Crazy Water. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah. It was known and still is as, having healing waters. And so there's even a place called the Crazy Water Hotel that you can visit, which is really cool. Was started in 1925. There's the Baker Hotel, which is being reconstructed, which is, I think it's even worth looking at now. It's just this massive building, but it is known as a healing place. And I think they're trying to kind of bring that back.
I guess celebrities back in the day, like we're talking the 1930s and 40s, used to come out to Mineral Wells and hang out, get their spa treatments in those healing waters.
Oh, yeah. The celebrities would go and they would perform sometimes, I think. So I think Frank Sinatra went out there. And fun fact, supposedly my grandfather in the 40s, he had a big band himself. So supposedly he played there. So I'm trying to track that down.
Tell us a little bit about some of the other getaways that are part of this list for summer weekend road trips.
Yeah, the reason these are cool is they're unexpected. It's not the typical trip that people would take. So one that I definitely want to take is by a writer, Danielle Lopez. And she grew up in the Rio Grande Valley, but she never drove the length of it. So she takes 2 days to drive the entire length of the valley. And it just sounds like an amazing trip. She goes from a town called Roma, ends up in South Padre, but there's butterfly centers and birding centers and towns that sound amazing. So that was one that definitely caught my eye. So Nick Petoskey took US 83, and so he went through towns like Shamrock, which has the tallest water tower in Texas, Childress. He saw some really cool kind of roadside attractions like a giant green brontosaurus. So that one was interesting. And then Addie Broyles went from Austin, and kind of a little bit similar to me, it was kind of a nostalgia trip. She recreated a motorcycle trip she would take with her uncle and sometimes her dad into the hill country to Luckenbach and Albert. So yeah, there's some cool stuff for people who want to get out this summer and just take a casual trip.
What makes a good road trip? Is it about the destination or is it about the journey?
I definitely think it's about the journey and the stops and the things you discover along the way. The little cafe you didn't know was there, or the old coffee or new coffee shop, or the roadside attractions that some of these people saw. I definitely think it's all about being able to stop along the way rather than just rush to the destination.
Yeah. How do you prefer to travel? Do you prefer to go with a bunch of people, or do you just get in and go solo?
I think usually with a couple people is fun because then you can kind of experience it together and have somebody to talk to. But if it's a quicker trip, like mine was about a day, then that was kind of nice alone because I could just be with my thoughts and listen to what I wanted to, and you can kind of just have some good alone time.
Do you think the road still lures folks the way that it used to?
I don't know. It's funny because, like I say in the piece that I wrote, these Sunday drives used to be a huge deal, right? When my mom was little, they would go on Sunday drives. And now, because we have a million screens and distractions and gas is expensive and there's more traffic, I don't think there's that allure like there used to be. But there's so much in Texas to see that can actually take you right back to that place in the past that is the reason people did this. I think it's worth exploring, but I don't know if it's as popular.
Dina Gashman is an author and contributor to Texas Highways. We're going to have a link to more so that you can do your own exploration over at texasstandard.org. Dina, thanks so much for joining us. And I know this is premature, but happy summer.
Thanks, you too.
Support for Texas Standard comes from TrialMed, conducting clinical research for over 30 years. Info on current trials in Texas at trialmed.com.
It's not just about the brisket or the ribs or the sausage or even the sides. It's the culture and people who are passionate about it. Where there's smoke, there's Daniel Vaughn, Texas Monthly Barbecue Editor. Join us next Thursday on the Texas Standard.
Support for Where There's Smoke comes from HEB.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. Much has been made of the use of artificial intelligence in schools. Often the story is about students generating work with something like ChatGPT and schools trying to put reasonable guardrails in place. But Houston ISD made an announcement this week that turns that narrative on its head. The district will launch what they're calling 9 artificial intelligence-focused schools for the next school year. Nusaiba Mazan reports on education for the Houston Chronicle. Nusaiba, welcome back to the Texas Standard.
Thanks for having me.
What does an AI-focused school mean in this context? Do we have details about how this will impact a student's day-to-day experience?
Yeah, so details are emerging for what Houston ISD is calling its, quote, future two schools. Essentially, the district announced that it would be shifting the curriculum, the day-to-day for schools in light of the emergence of AI for a future with AI that where it will be, quote, ubiquitous. It cites, the district cites a McKinsey and Company study from the Management Consulting Group about the reduction of jobs. I've looked at that study. It is a reduction in U.S. work hours because of artificial intelligence. And so what the district is doing for now 9 schools is it is shifting its day-to-day. So core subjects will be taught relatively in the morning in the first 4 hours a day. And then it is shifting to what the district is calling hands-on experiences and workshops in the afternoon. And that would be skills, what they're calling, quote, human-centric skills for the afternoon that would prepare students for skills that would not be taken by AI, so to speak.
Okay, so give me an example of that. What are some of these, I guess, human-centered skills that they're focusing on?
Yeah, the district has been promoting examples of workshops for different grade levels. So one was like building a musical, one was teaching students chess. Some of the workshops would be music and sports. And so essentially it's focusing in on skills and activities that AI cannot do.
So, from what I understand and what you've reported, they're kind of making this attractive to families. The schools will be open really all day, early in the morning to after dinner time, and they're going to serve students all of those meals at no cost. But what if parents just aren't interested? I mean, can they switch campuses if they are currently, allotted to go to one of these future 2 schools?
They can. They can opt out of the school and enroll in a nearby zone school, according to what the district has put out.
So what are you watching as this story develops?
I'm watching how this looks like for day to day for families, and I'm watching what it will look like for the core subject areas. We've heard different details emerge, such as advanced math and reading coursework would be voluntary. We've heard AI-driven platforms at one point for some coursework. And so we're trying to get a sense of what this looks like on a day-to-day. To what extent will students be interacting with AI? Some of this will have AI literacy and learning how to write prompts into AI. But what will this really mean for students, especially since AI in the classroom is so new?
What are you hearing right now from the community, or are they all still sort of adjusting to this announcement and what it might mean?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of adjustment and people still waiting on details. important to note for the listener, there are a lot of announcements coming out of the district right now. So there's a lot to watch for schools and new school models, new school managers, etc.
Is there any precedent for this? Are there other schools in Texas or elsewhere that have done something similar, or is Houston ISD really on the leading edge here?
Not to my knowledge. I don't think that the district, I'm not aware of the district looking at any other schools in Texas as models for what it's trying to do here. However, it should be noted that this is considered an iteration or building off of reforms already rolled out by state appointed Superintendent Mike Miles. The model, instructional model, and the basis for these schools is still going to build off of what has already been rolled out in HISD.
Nusaiba Mizan covers education for the Houston Chronicle. Nusaiba, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
And you're listening to the Texas Standard. Audience and engagement editor Wells Dunbar is monitoring the talk of Texas. Hey, Wells.
Hello, Laura. Great to be with you. And as I've been talking about earlier this week, it's been a busy time for cannabis law in Texas with a pair of changes to state rules sparking fresh confusion about what's legal and what isn't. You know, earlier this week, we tried to sort through what's actually changed and what hasn't in a conversation with our resident hemp expert, KUT's Nathan Bernier. Go give that a listen if you want the clearest breakdown we've got right now. It's available there on our website at texasstandard.org, because honestly, it is pretty complicated. I think it's fair to say pretty much everything about quasi-legal cannabis in Texas right now, from what's on store shelves to potency levels to how these products are made and marketed under a patchwork of state rules. Even people who follow this story closely don't always agree on where the lines are or how solid they are. So this is, the story. This is the context that we're looking to hear from folks in. I was asking for people to share their own takes on this as part of the Talk of Texas. You can go there to texasstandard.org/talk to record your perspective. But maybe, Laura, we should be asking for people's questions or comments instead, because this is such a confusing area. All these different types. Yeah, all these different types of THC. It's enough to make you think of the good old days. Never mind, I won't go into that. But closing in on 800 comments on our Facebook page, this conversation about it, I think it really represents or reflects how the questions that people have and how confusing it truly is. Interesting comment here from one listener, Jeffrey Trick, who's referring to the conversation and the way this legislation over hemp has unfolded in Texas. He says this about the legislators that legalized it: they think you can smoke industrial hemp. I mean, fascinatingly enough, that's what opened the door to all this quasi-legal THC here in Texas. He goes on to say that the trick is to know what you're talking about and distinguishing between industrial hemp grown for quantity and hemp flower grown for people's use. And of course, we are seeing, like, for instance, one form of non-potent hemp being treated to come up with these, what can in many cases be exceedingly potent forms of THC. John Smith says, remember how long it took for some counties to start selling alcohol? Weed will be no different in Texas. And another comment here from Jack Bowling, who says, if you think it should truly be illegal, put up a vote for full legalization and let the voters decide. Watch voter participation go up. Texas doesn't really have anything on the books that would allow for, a referendum. It has to go through the legislature, so it can't be initiated by the people. But suffice to say, I think we would get some good turnout for that one. And again, we're hoping to get good turnout on folks' perspectives about all this stuff. So go to texasstandard.org/talk, record a message or a question for us, because there's lots to talk about.
All right, we appreciate you, Wells, and we appreciate you joining us for today's Texas Standard. You can always keep up with us online at texasstandard.org. See you back here tomorrow.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Waldridge, Adrian Killam, the George Huntington family, and St. David's Foundation. Additionally, Texas Mutual Insurance Company is a founding sponsor of Texas Standard.